Most images that you capture will need a little work, but some may require major correction. Adobe has offered Camera Raw specifically for that. And those of you who haven't purchased a high-end camera, a DSLR camera, which stands for Digital Single Lens Reflex Camera, may not know about Camera Raw or have ever seen it. If you buy a camera with changeable lenses, that is a DSLR. They start around $600, but they can go $10,000 and beyond. The good news is Adobe Camera Raw works on other file formats that aren't RAW. And let me explain what RAW is. When my digital camera, I shoot with a Nikon N1 for travel. It's a very affordable consumer class camera, but it is a DSLR. It's the first affordable, in my opinion, changeable lens camera to give me better shots. Now, when I shoot, I have my camera do 2 images at once. And I'm in my New Orleans folder, and I'm going to choose Edit, Select All. And I'll go to View and Slideshow in Adobe Bridge. With this slideshow, the first image I'll see is the pre-developed, pre-baked, pre-processed image from the camera, the JPEG. And when you buy a consumer class camera, one without changeable lenses, typically they only shoot in JPEG. There's no option for RAW. So the high-end cameras shoot 2 images at once. And the RAW one is just that. It's the closest thing you can get to a digital negative. It's not color-corrected. It's not sharpened. It's for the photographer to do the developing. I hit the spacebar to pause my slideshow, and if I go back with my left arrow key, here you could see I've put my camera on vivid, so the JPEGs are very punched. The colors are richer. It's definitely sharper. But I can do more with this RAW file. And Photoshop supports over 400 different RAW formats. Every camera maker has their own form of RAW. There is an extension, a .raw, .raw, that may be on your camera's digital negative or RAW format file, but there's a lot of others. .crw stands for Camera Raw. .cr2 is a newer version of Camera Raw. .dng stands for Digital Negative. It's also a RAW format. And mine is a Nikon, and it uses .nef. So if your camera has the option to shoot 2 at once, always turn that on. You could do so much more with the undeveloped one. It reminds me of Ansel Adams. He had this photo, Moonrise, which he kept taking the film back into the darkroom and redeveloping it to make the sky the focal point, or the mountains the focal point, or the landscape, or the moon. I think he did 15 or more different versions of the same image. With a RAW file, you can never harm the original. You never overwrite it, but you can do a lot of different things with it. So as I go through this, I'll see JPEG, pre-developed, pre-baked by the camera, and sports photographers tend to only shoot in JPEG. It gives them very fast shutter speed. They want the best possible shot. They need to upload it instantly. So even if their camera could shoot in RAW, it won't shoot quickly enough to capture all that action and motion. High-end photographers usually always want both, or may not even shoot JPEG because they're doing all the developing on their own. The JPEGs are great for comps, comparables for the client. So you could say, this is the series I've got. Keep in mind they're pre-developed by the camera, but I'll do far different things with them when I develop them. So if you have a lot of time and money for the post-developing, or if you want a lot of control, you shoot in both with a high-end camera. So here's the JPEG again, and the RAW. JPEG, really nice shot initially. RAW, I can pull a lot more out of it. But the JPEGs will look better at first glance. Treat your RAWs like undeveloped film. In fact, this JPEG, it didn't really help this shot a lot. The RAW isn't radically different. I notice the sharpening and a little bit of vibrance, but I can go much farther with the RAW. So let me hit Escape to get out of the slideshow, and I'll switch to my Kelly workspace where I've put all my panels in one spot down on the lower left. So it's just my more comfortable view. This gives me a much larger preview area, and I could click once to zoom in. But let's take one of these shots and do some raw developing to see what we can get out of the image. So here's an example. I'm going to grab these chili peppers. So I have the JPEG, which if I double click, it opens in Photoshop. I'll leave it open there so we can see the difference. I'll go back to Bridge, File, Browse in Bridge, and I'll double click on the Camera Raw. And in the Camera Raw, I will always do at least 4 things here in the basic portion of the panel. The Camera Raw dialog has a lot of tools built in, but let's just take a look at my standard correction procedure. So I'm going to fill my screen or hit maximize, and I always move the exposure first. Do I want it overall lighter or darker? Maybe I want a darker shot. Maybe the lightness isn't what I'm shooting for. I want less attention on the background. I'm going to go a little lighter on this and get to richer shadows a different way. When I move exposure up, I'll move blacks down. And with those 2 small moves, here is my before and after. I've already punched it a bit, helped the color. Shadows will open up all the detail in between these chili peppers. But it's also opening the background. I have some other tricks that I'll use to correct that in Photoshop. My goal is to get the best usable front portion of the image. So if I take shadows darker, it's going to plug up all that detail. It really depends on your goal. But I tend to open up the shadows, richen the blacks, in almost all cases trying to not lose detail as I do that. And then clarity is overall mid-tone contrast. So you can actually double-click on the slider to reset it, slide it up, double-click to see a little before and after of just one setting to see if you like it with that additional change. If I turn preview off and on, I can see an overall before and after. And I really don't like too much contrast. It does push the whites towards white and the blacks towards black, but it can make the image get really posterized, lose detail very fast. So I will add some contrast to this, but not a lot. And I'm not even going to show sharpening yet. I'm just going to show my basic settings for correcting the image. If there's too much yellow, I can slide a bit towards blue, or towards yellow if I like that yellow cast in the image. So removing overall color cast is a breeze, and it's everything in one spot, in one dialog, without a bunch of adjustment layers and masks. I've gone from here to here in about 3 minutes. The last thing I'll do is scroll down and boost the vibrance. The vibrance just pops or richens up all the color, and if I slide it to the right and double click, you could see a subtle move, more in the background, not a lot in other areas. So this is a darker image overall, so maybe vibrance won't help me. And then I'll decide whether I want exposure, lighter or darker. I'm going to leave it about here and click Open Image. And if I go to Window, Arrange, to Up Vertical, here is my Camera Raw, the .nef, and here was what my pre-baked JPEG was. It's a really completely different image, and I've only shown you one piece of Camera Raw. You can use Camera Raw on your JPEGs and TIFFs, and in Photoshop CC, I can use them on anything as a filter. So if you aren't one of those lucky people who's purchased a high-end camera, you can run Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and do everything I just did on existing shots. So this is your introduction to Camera Raw, and I rarely bring a photo into Photoshop without doing a little correction on it in RAW first. Try this on some of your own photos and just absorb the power and the speed that ACR, Adobe Camera Raw, gives you.